So we came together as a team and built we got like 17, 22 million, I think, was our highest revenue that we generated.
What did that look like?
Today's segment of Life is Business is brought to you by Austin Media Group, a full-service creative agency dedicated to helping businesses grow their online presence, and Complete Image Manufacturing, a full-service fashion and textile manufacturing company serving emerging brands and corporations.
So we are back to Life is Business podcast. We have an interesting guest today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you started and all of the things that you do?
Okay. Originally from Detroit, Michigan. Bryan Waldron, started school here in Detroit Public Schools. Just like any other kid, West Side kid, right off of 7 Mile in Mendota. Started education here, McDowell Elementary, which is, if anybody knows the West Side, McDowell is like, it's I don't know if everybody saw Facebook and social media just recently, but Cooley had like an event, and they basically shut Finkel down. Like it was just this Cooley event, right? But that's a high school. McDowell is an elementary school. Every year we have like reunions, you know what I'm saying? Like, and we over here at Tyndall, or we're over here at Northwest Activity Center, and we at this bar and this stuff. So like McDowell has like a long line of like just community and love, and everybody went to school together. Like, and it's not even, the age gaps is crazy, but we do that every year for McDowell, and it sits right off Outer Drive in Mendota. But that was where everything kind of started. That's where I got my start, like as far as just Detroit, from kindergarten on up. And then my family moved out to Plymouth, and we was like, out in Plymouth and Canton is very different than it is now, but like, it wasn't very many of us, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that was coming from 7th grade Detroit to Canton back then, like, black don't crack, but they go gray, you know what I'm saying? So, I'm at an age where it was very different. Like you walk down the street, I could be with my friends, my family or whoever, my brothers, my friends, and you was getting bottles thrown at you. Back then they didn't have recyclable bottles. They was glass, you know what I'm saying? Thrown at you. Hey, nigga, you know what I'm saying? Get off the street, this and that, you know what I mean? It was crazy. Went through that. Loved basketball, played basketball, wound up going to Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. And, it was a time when Detroit business wasn't there, right? Like, we already know, like, the history of what happened with Coleman Young and Wayne County and Oakland County and Elwood Brooks Patterson, you know what I'm saying? They absolutely took the business out of Detroit, the business base and tax base. So that's what made Oakland County, but at one time, I don't know if it's still what is, but the 3rd wealthiest county in America. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I think it is.
Yeah, so
for sure.
So all of that happened, and I was an automotive kid anyway, because my dad was pretty big time at Ford at the time. So I went into the automotive industry. I moved to Chicago, worked for Ford, and immediately found out that wasn't what I wanted to do. Now, when you do something, you go to school, when you're doing it. I stayed like 5 years, but I knew a year and a half in, this ain't something I want to do, because it was old world business thought, you know what I'm saying? Like, we sit and we talk, and you know how business is done 9 times out of 10. You might have heated discussions, but it's a certain level of respect.
Right.
At Ford, if you're not in the union, if you're salaried at the plant level, it's a type of mental breakdown, like, because these guys, you come in fairly young, you start building, you go from 70,000, 80,000, 110, 150, and you get a wife, a kid, you locked in, you got a house, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Where are you going to make that type of money at, right? Like, you can't leave the automotive industry. So what's asked of you, that's why you see, even to this day, on the salary side, it's a lot of drug use, a lot of alcoholism, and a lot of broken families, you know what I'm saying? Because you work so many hours at the plant level, you get a plant life, and it's almost like a different world. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a different world. So I saw it pretty quick that wasn't my thing. But I had been one of those kids that grew up, and a lot of people know early on what they like and what they don't like, what they want to do. I wasn't that kid. I thought I was going to be a Ford guy, manufacturing Ford, this and that, like my dad, but it was very different than what I thought it was going to be. And, my dad was hardcore, my uncles are hardcore, so I'm not really trying to hear some other dude talk to me crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't talk to me that crazy, so you're not going to talk to me like this. And I didn't have a family at the time. I was still young, so I wasn't locked in where I felt like, man, if I leave, what am I going to do? I just had to figure out what I wanted to do at the time. Anybody with just, I guess, a level of intelligence, we can find something that we can do. But I had never been taught, find something that you love to do. Right? Because sooner or later, if you're doing something that you can do, it's going to catch up to you. It might be the mortgage, it might be an argument with your wife, it might be you're just tired, but sooner or later you're going to get tired. You're going to say, I'm not really growing, and I'm not really growing what I'm doing because I don't love what I'm doing.
Right.
I might like the money, right? But no matter how much money it is, you're going to get to a point sooner or later where you're going to lose interest. At least anybody with just a certain amount of intelligence. You're going to get to a point where you just, man, this ain't what I want to do. I'm not passionate about it. You might wake up one day, you might be driving into work, whatever. But if you don't want to wake up and work on something, or if you're not waking up in the middle of the night, I learned that after I came back here. And I was in Chicago for about 15 years. And I was in the airline industry, passionate about that, 4-minute burnout with that, because airlines is 365, 24/7. Like, that's a whole different monster. You know what I'm saying? Like, I thought the plants was fast, but the airline industry was crazy. You know what I'm saying? But at that time, O'Hare Airport was the busiest airport in the world. Now it's Atlanta, but back then it was O'Hare in Chicago. So turning those flights and managing those flights and managing the food kitchen for those flights was, at that time, it wasn't any blacks in leadership position with international flights. Now, domestic side, American Airlines, Delta, all of them, but yeah, it was different blacks in my same position. But on the international side, servicing Virgin Atlantic, Japan Airlines, Swiss Air, Canadian Air, Aer Lingus, Lufthansa, like, you didn't have that. They was very strict. They was very kind of like, it was racist as hell. You know what I'm saying? Like, they had certain types of people working on certain flights, Japan flights. You had Asians, certain flights. You had, Somalis, different things like that. But did that for about 6 years. And then from that, I really already understood from Ford processes and the organization. So I took that to the airlines and instituted that, made them much more effective. And then I was like, man, that's when I kind of like started wanting to try to do something on my own. So I did contract packaging. I did it for like Kimberly-Clark.
What is contract packaging for the people that don't know?
Contract packaging is like most of the things that you buy in stores, they're packaged elsewhere. Like, very few companies package their things together, like down to like even some of the, like, I would say, like candies, you know what I'm saying? Hershey's Kisses and stuff like that. They might produce the candy, but typically they don't package it, you know what I'm saying? So that was contract packaging. When you go to like stores in the middle of the winter time and it's Christmas season and you see these big extravagant baskets and they got wine bottles in them, they got cheese and they got this, all of those things come from different companies and they're packaged within one company. So that's usually contract packagers. There's some huge contract packagers or small ones. Easter stuff, you know what I'm saying? All of them things, they're like from contract packagers. So that was an expensive thing to go into because it takes a lot of equipment, and 9 times out of 10 it's hard with equipment. But that was when everybody was starting to kind of get the feel of, okay, we got minority businesses. How can me as a company? I met a guy that was real cool, and we became partners. So he had equipment, and I happened to be black, you know what I'm saying, and I knew the industry, so we came together as a team and built we got like 22 million, I think, was our highest revenue that we generated.
What did that look like? Like 17, 22 million. What did that feel?
And this is from the contract packaging?
Okay.
Yeah, you got to be efficient because the thing is, when you negotiate a deal, when you negotiate with Target is a major company. So when you go out to Minnesota and you sit with them, they know where they need to be for their profitability. It might be a sweet spot in there. You got to find that sweet spot and be able to make sure you can deliver so you're profitable. So in Chicago, especially outside of Chicago, like in the suburbs, you got a huge Hispanic population. So the thing is, when you're small, you want contracts, but you might not necessarily have a manpower to really do certain jobs. So you don't have, like I said, a lot of those contract packaging is like seasonal in certain times. So you might blow up for huge, you could get 10 contracts for Easter, but then 2 weeks later you're done. You have nothing, you know what I'm saying? So you have to be creative as far as like, when you say what's that look like, the numbers are great, but you got to be able to deliver a quality product, or you get penalties.
Yeah. You
got to be able to deliver on time. And most of that stuff is coming in from China. So now it's coming in, and a lot of these majors like Target, they don't pay attention, right? Like that's the funny thing about manufacturing in the States compared to manufacturing in China. China, you could have a manufacturing facility that moves 2 days after they say that they're going to be building here, and they move 5 blocks away, you know what I'm saying? So a guy from Target might go in there and say, okay, this is what we want, build us 100,000 of these units. So they make 100,000 units, but they doing them cheap. They're using instead of like maybe dye, instead of using a dye that's made out of steel, they might be using a dye that's made out of wood. So now when you go 20,000 units in a manufacturing facility here in the States that's made out of metal or steel, you make 20,000. All 20,000 of them are exactly the same. When they doing it in China, they cutting labor, cutting down on their manufacturing. They might be using a wood dye. After 5,000 of them, that shape changes just slightly, right? Okay. Just slightly. And we used to see that stuff come through all the time because we're putting stuff together. I never forget, it was like this egg thing, and it had like a flammable liquid. It was basically a candle, but it was an egg for Easter and all this stuff. Women were buying them. And we were making them. And Target, we sent out, we always send out like samples, right? Okay, this is what it looks like. Target, yes, this is how we want it. But while we were making it, now we got to make 50,000 units. We get about halfway in, and I get a phone call from my line leaders, because different lines had different things that they were building. But she's like, these things keep falling, they keep falling. So my supervisors and everybody, a lot of them were pretty good. One guy was an older guy, he was retired, but they get lazy. So they called me like, Ryan, they're falling over. So I'm like, what do you mean? So I come out and look at them, and you could clearly, once you set them down, I'm like, this ain't the same thing that I bid on. Like, and you can see the mold must have changed a little bit, so it was making them fall over. But these things is flammable. You know what I'm saying? They got flammable liquid. You light it, and you put it on your table, and you walk away, and the wind blows something, and it falls. Now you got a fire. So I had to call Target, like, listen, this stuff's coming in from China. It's not the same as what we was getting and going through these boxes 20,000 pieces ago. You know what I'm saying? So it's all types of little stuff like that. So Though I'm saying it that way because that 20 million, if you're not efficient and you're not cost effective, it's going to hit your bottom line. You know what I'm saying? So out of that 20 million, let's say, a lot of manufacturers, you want to be able to keep in production 7% or 10% or 12% of what the revenue is that you're generating for your profits, right? So if I'm at 10%, that 20 million turns into 2 million quick. You know what I'm saying? So that 2 million, any little mistake, if it's a mistake in how I bid or how I broke it down, right? Or if there's a change, right? Because like I said, you've got it's like this. It's not a consistent, right? Car manufacturers, you pretty much know this is how many I'm selling this month, this is how many I'm selling this month, how many I'm selling. You got that history, so you know. So you know I'm going to schedule 800 cars a day. This line is going to build 800 cars. This shift is going to build this many. You know that. That's constant. Those type of things are up and down, and they depend on what jobs I can get, and if I'm bidding, right? So now I'm bidding against 4 other guys. So now my margins might be here. My margin might be at 10%, 7%, whatever it is. So now I get a job, and I've got to ramp up. But the thing is, when you're a small company, you can't carry, and it's not constant, you can only carry so many full-time employees. Now you just need people in labor. So if it's 10 different items and they need to be put in this packaging, I have to do the breakdown, but then now I got to get a labor force, which is temporary labor.
Right.
So the temporary labor that you get, most people at least understand temporary labor. Temporary labor is not just bringing somebody in at $10 an hour. Temporary labor is I'm paying a 37% markup. So that $10 an hour turns into $13.70 really, because I'm paying a temporary labor force to make sure that I've got these people to work. And that was a good thing. You could ramp up, you could bring it down, you could control how many people you had working for you, but a lot of times you don't necessarily control the quality that well.
So it keeps you to managing your overhead labor-wise, but that quality, that's the hardest piece of it. But that is the reason why the initiative for manufacturing need to come back to the States, because like if you're doing business, especially if you're a minority-owned business, if you're doing business with these big box retailers or anybody, like you said, that quality and that lead time and making sure that you can get in that sweet spot with your numbers, because that's what we look at in our company. That we emphasize on that lead time, quality, and trying to make your spend.
And then I want to ask you, so what about before the 22 million? How long did it take you to hit that mark? Like to be like, okay, this one, like when you hit it, and what hurdles do you feel like you went through to hit that?
For me, it took us probably about 5 to 6 years. Because when I sold and I left, we were at about the 6-year mark. For me, I think the hurdle was we had the equipment we needed. Our facility wasn't, you're in Chicago, outside of Chicago, so cost is a little bit more. And our facility wasn't what a lot of places wanted to see, right? Like our floor wasn't a sealed concrete floor, right? Our floor, and our facility was in an industrial park that was older. So there were certain jobs that I couldn't do because they wouldn't pass certain quality levels that you had to have as far as cleanliness and as far as certain equipment. So that was kind of the hardest thing. I had to really find certain jobs that I felt like we had the capability of doing. But at the same time, because I call it manning, right? Like you're manning, it's variable manning. I got 75 people today, 125 tomorrow, 250 on Monday. That's variable manning. So you had to look at jobs. I had to look at it specifically and say, okay, here's the breakdown. How would I do this? How am I going to do this? It's 18 pieces. I can use 7 people to do certain things, 2 here, 3 for this. You're going to do insert 3. So it was always, that was like the hardest part and the challenge. I didn't have a lot of challenge as far as getting the actual contracts because so many of those guys, once you do one contract and you give them product and you do it in a timely manner and it's able to ship out and this goes to all the distribution centers, they remember that, and they say, okay, they can do this. You know what I'm saying? So that part was, obviously you have some companies that are just not going to really mess with you, but that was probably the biggest challenge, is that just being able to be a small fish and get things, because there's guys that I'm competing with that are $500 million a year, you know what I'm saying, packaging companies. But if I'm able to take some Kimberly-Clark gloves, and package those and do them the right way, that was big. And then some of them have such tight restrictions, like you can't bid on them. Like I didn't have certain things fenced off and able to make sure that things don't come up missing. Like when you're talking about doing TheraFlu, like you have to have certain measures in place to ensure like theft doesn't happen, right? They can't ship you 200,000 units of TheraFlu and you lose 50 cases. You know what I'm saying? Like that's big because it's a drug. You know what I'm saying? Now you're bringing in Food Drug Administration, so FDA is coming in, being involved. It's a mess. So a lot of them, that was probably the biggest challenge, not being able to get certain jobs, because that's where a lot of profit margins are at.
So after the 5 or 6 years there, you said you sold your stake in it?
Yep, I sold my stake to my partner, because in between that, I had met Gilbert. Okay. So once I met Gilbert, a year and a half, 2 years almost went by. Well, about a year and a half went by. I didn't know who he was. We met through our sons. So our sons hooped, they was at camp, all that stuff. Kids, they link up when they go to these camps. Now kids got phones, this and that, all that stuff. So they
which son?
Grant, Gigi.
And for y'all don't know,
and my son was Colin. So yeah. And
for y'all don't know who Dan Gilbert is, he owned almost everything here in Detroit.
Right, yeah, he does. Yeah.
So shout out to Colin, man.
Yeah, Colin made that happen.
Him and my guys, Colin.
Yeah, that's your man.
Yeah.
So Colin was playing basketball. Him and Grant became cool, and then me and Dan met, and then it was like a Thanksgiving holiday type of thing, and we was home. We was here visiting, and it just was one of the things where he was like, "Oh, we want to go to the game, this and that." And I'm like, "Man, we live in Chicago. We go to see D Rose play against LeBron." And he was like, "Oh, I want to go see." And I'm thinking, "Man, I don't want to go on 75 out to Auburn Hills. I ain't have no interest in it because we in the city and we in Chicago. We go right down the street. We on Madison. We at the Bulls Stadium. You go out here, 75, ain't nothing out there. Once you want to leave, you can't leave. Traffic. It's just." I'm like, "Man, I don't want to do that." He was, "Dad, please, I want to go to the game." So I'm like, "All right, fine, whatever." Thanksgiving comes, and he's like, "We got to leave, because we're going to go to the game. Well, we got to leave now. We got to go meet them at the airport." And I'm like, "Airport? Like, what is you talking about?" So I called Dan, like, "Hey, what is he talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, we flying out to Cleveland." So I'm like, "What?" I'm thinking the Bull, like the Cavs was here, but it wasn't. So it was just a mess. And find out, like I said, he owned the Cavs. He owned Rocket Morgan and all that other stuff. Well, Quicken Loans at the time.
That's good when your kids gonna tell you everything.
Nah, because they don't, kids, it don't matter to them. And I'm like, this is a mess. So we go to the game. Me and him kind of going back and forth. I'm like, you an asshole. You know what I'm saying? But we was cool. We would talk. We would always text each other. And then, after that, he was just like, "Man, you need to come back to Detroit, And I'm like, I don't see it, At the time, my wife, she's not from here. I didn't live. My kids, they all born in Chicago. And it was nothing really that I did that match what they was doing, you know.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of residential real estate at the time on my own, but I had never really done retail and commercials, leasing, and none of that stuff. So I had to look, you know, because he got 100 some odd companies. I kind of looked at different stuff that he was doing, and then I looked at what was happening. Bedrock was really in its early stages. I'm like, man, they can make a difference, and it could be a big difference if it's done a certain way. And his vision was just, you know, people that don't know him, people talk all the time. Shit, that's what people do. But for me, I knew him, and his vision was genuine. You know what I'm saying? It was genuine, and the way he treated people was genuine. Now he's crazy, and he acts a nut, but he act a nut no matter on who. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not. He's one of these dudes that just he's genuine. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, man, you know, if I come out there, I want to do, you know, I want to go over to Bedrock, because at the time it was, you should come over and work for his wife, Jenny Gilbert. Jenny had a company she was starting up called Depop, which was, they did like interior design, kind of like a boutique architecture firm, interior design, and on the moving, they did like moving too. Like they would organize people's offices and different stuff. So that was operations. So operations, I'm able to look at things. I can look at pretty much anything and say, the way my mind works, I look at it, and coming from Ford and always being in operations, the first thing I look at is, how do I cut time? Mm-hmm. How do I make this go from a minute and a half to do this to 45 seconds? I'm always looking at, even if I save 3 seconds here, if I'm manufacturing 10,000 units, now I've actually saved 3.5 hours of production.
It's funny. Do you look at like everything like that?
Yeah, I do. It's messed up. It's messed up.
So that's the gift and the curse.
It's a curse. It's a gift, but it becomes a curse after a while, because you can't stop.
Can't turn it off.
You can't.
We'll be right back after this.